Stonehocker. I'm 35. I live in California. I work in HR systems. I get super nerdy about spreadsheets full of people. I'm a triathlete and a musician. I love teaching just about anything. For as long as I can remember, I've had same-sex attraction, and also for as long as I can remember, I have had a knowledge of the existence of God and a relationship with Him. I remember when I was really young telling my mom that I had this feeling, I felt homesick for heaven. I had enough of a relationship. I wanted to be close to God. And all through this story, I think one of the things that is kind of unique about my story is that it's actually never been a testimony struggle. It's never been a struggle of figuring out how does this experience fit into God's plan for me, which I might worry about that making my story feel like it's not accessible to some people who would be listening, but I hope not. I just always had that relationship with God to where I know that He loves me, and I've gotten to know Him through my life experiences, and through the teaching of some great parents, getting started early, but also just this gift of faith and testimony that started before I can even remember. I don't remember when I gained my testimony of the gospel of Jesus Christ because it happened so early. And so my whole journey has been kind of phrased within this environment of knowing God and knowing who He is. So there's been a lot of security in that. It hasn't taken away all of the struggle. There's definitely been a lot of struggle. It's difficult, no matter how you slice it. But it did take away the part where I had to worry about, do I fit into God's kingdom? Do I fit into His plan? Does God exist? Because could God exist? Who would let this happen to me? Or because I know that He exists, and I know that He loves me, to where those questions don't really come up, and my relationship with God answers all of those kinds of questions for me. Because even though I don't know all the particular answers, how exactly is this going to play out in my life? How is this going to interact with my life and, say, the possibility of getting married and, at least in mortality, fulfilling what I know His plan is? I don't have the particular answers, but I know Him well enough to know that no matter what happens with me, no matter what's going on inside of me in terms of the same-sex attraction and any other thing that I deal with, I know He's going to take care of it. And that security has helped a lot. So kind of the story with same-sex attraction, like I said, as early as I can remember, it's been there. And it took a really long time to, I guess, not to figure out that it was there. I always knew it was there. I noticed it on a regular basis. It's kind of hard not to notice. It took me a long time to name it to myself. There was a lot of fear, and there was a lot, to start with, I would have these feelings, these attractions, whatever. I'd be in different situations that were difficult for me. And I would just be trying to repent away every little thought. But yeah, every time a thought or a feeling of attraction would come, I'd be repenting for it. Sorry for that thought, and that thought, and that one, and that one. 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 And that And so there was a period of that, and in a lot of ways, I wanted to pretend like it didn't exist. Not really, because I always knew it was there, and it presented itself constantly. But I guess I just hoped that if I hung on long enough, that that it would eventually go away. Or I mean, I prayed a lot for it to go away, to just stop happening. Just like I prayed for help getting through other problems in my life, and yeah, I just thought, hopefully it'll eventually go away, and it didn't, obviously. I'm still here, and it's still here with me. I was afraid. Number one, it was taboo, and I couldn't talk to anybody about it. There was kind of a general taboo about sex in my family, so I couldn't talk about things, other sexuality things either. With my parents, it was uncomfortable. But I mean, in the time that when I was a kid and growing up, it was really difficult to it was just something you didn't talk about. And so I didn't. I kept it inside, and I was really afraid that anybody would ever notice it in my mannerisms. And I actually did. I didn't struggle a lot with, or I guess I usually separated. I guess I thought, well, I have feelings of attraction, or like I have these thoughts that come into my head, but I'm not actually gay. These things happen, but that's like, it's not who I am. And so then like separating, yeah, well, there's all these stereotypes, all these stereotypical mannerisms and behaviors, etc., that come along with being gay. And I guess I tried my best to make sure that I didn't exhibit any of those. So that, I mean, because I didn't want to be that. I didn't want to be what I understood as gay. And so, I just made sure, well, I wasn't just trying to live it on the surface. I didn't just want it to not be discovered by other people. I wanted it to really not be there. And so, I think I got pretty good at, and making sure that didn't show up. And there are a lot of things that other people point to in their childhood. They're like stereotypical things that like they knew because of these stereotypical things. But the funny thing is, like, all of my 7 straight brothers played with the same toys, watched the same movies, like all of the things that I might otherwise, say were stereotypically gay about me as a child. It applied to all of my brothers. So it really didn't really occur to me that way. I did have times when my brothers called me Femi, and that was really difficult. And I was, a lot more emotionally sensitive. I actually separate a lot of that, because really a lot of that stuff is just my personality, and it doesn't actually, it's not necessarily connected to who I'm attracted to, or the actions that I choose. All of this, I just tried to pretend like it wasn't there, and tried to make sure that it wasn't there and that nobody could notice. I think I told a bishop once, something that I actually never had real difficulties with pornography, but like the kind of like borderline things that I was kind of like, well, I mean, it tipped me off to know that like the things that I was interested in looking at, and it worried me. And so I, told a bishop about it. It wasn't necessarily, I guess it was kind of like half confession. This isn't even like that big of a thing, but that bishop never did anything with that. And so I just kind of went on, went through high school. It wasn't really I guess it wasn't like a burning thing. Like um, I need to act on this. I need to come out. I need to tell people. I mean, because I was just trying to be a different person. I didn't want that to be who I was. And I also I didn't, there weren't a ton of people to date in terms of girls where I was growing up. Also, my family had some pretty strict rules about dating, and when you couldn't go steady with a girl till after your mission. So I really wasn't, I wasn't in a place where I was actually trying to have romantic relationships with girls because I wasn't supposed to. And so I guess I probably would have noticed a little bit more otherwise, but I didn't. So I got through high school fine. There were things that were extra difficult. Locker rooms were really difficult. Things like that. But I made it through okay. My mission, which you could think that would be a difficult time. It was actually kind of an awesome time because I had a guy who was assigned to be with me 24/7. I had a friend. I had somebody that I was commanded to love. I was supposed to love my companion, and other people probably had a hard time doing that. And why do I have to do this? Why is this important? Why do we have to have companionship inventory? Why is our companionship relationship important to teaching the gospel? And I'm just yeah, I have somebody who has to have a good relationship with me. So in some ways that was easy. I didn't have a lot of difficulty with it on the mission. And again, I wasn't trying to date, so I wasn't showing up any difficulty there. When I got home from my mission, I was ready to be married day one. I come from a big family. I'm the second oldest of 9 kids. I had helped take care of all my little brothers and sisters. I was ready to be a dad. I was ready to be a husband and father. I was ready for all of that right away. So many people wanted to wait and play around. And I was just what, what is the deal? I'm ready for marriage and family right now. Day one. If I had had somebody to marry day one, I would have been ready for it. And then I kept dating and then I kept dating and I dated a lot. Lots of first dates, second dates, third dates, maybe. No relationships that would ever go anywhere. Part of that's because I never practiced in high school. So I had no idea what I was doing. And all of a sudden it was high school was don't do anything, don't do anything, don't do anything. And then back from the mission, it's get married, do it all now. And I didn't know how. And then there was this other part that's I don't actually have the drive inside that pushes other guys past all the insecurities, all the difficult things with dating. I don't have that. And so, here I am 35, and still, I've had one girlfriend once for 1 week. And that relationship actually was kind of a little bit of a turning point in terms of, what I said about naming it to myself, because I got to that relationship. I had never kissed anyone. I never held anybody's hand. And so I go into that relationship. I held her hand. I was super excited about that. Because I was progressing the relationship. It turns out I got bored of that pretty fast. I was wait, do I still have to hold her hand? Because it's kind of hot and sweaty, and it's not I don't really like it. But I liked her. I do like women. I'm attracted to them in just about every other way. And so I wanted this relationship to work out. And sometime in that 1 week that we were dating, we were walking around the block and just kind of talking about, I was trying to figure out my feelings. And she said, "Do you ever want to kiss me?" And well, I kind of did, actually. And so we kissed, and it was the weirdest thing, and I didn't feel anything good, anything positive. I mean, talking to people since, found out that lots of first kisses are horrible, and you don't necessarily feel anything. Like, okay, wish somebody had told me that. But it still doesn't really change the other part that was going on inside me, that this same-sex attraction part of things. So, but up to that point, I still hadn't named it to myself. I was still in the mode of, I have these thoughts all the time, but I am not. Like, I'm not gay. That isn't who I am. It's just like, I have these thoughts that happen frequently, but temporarily, and they're going to go away. And I think I was hoping that if I just made it to marriage, if I could make it not matter, and I could get through to marriage, that then, like, it wouldn't matter anymore, because then I wouldn't need to worry about, like, where attractions were. Like, I would have someone, we would be married, we would work things out together, and then everything would be fine. When I kissed her and I didn't feel anything, and it was so weird and it was so foreign, the thoughts that went through my head were, what if it's real? Like, what if it's not just like these temporary thoughts that I get all the time? What if this is a real thing in my life? And what if this is going to get in the way of me dating and getting married? What if, what if it's something I can't actually pretend away? And I started crying, like, right there with her. And we just, like, stood there, hugging, and her kind of, like, just holding me and comforting me. And I couldn't tell her why I was crying, obviously. Or I guess it was obvious to me at the time. I had never told anybody. And I just, it was such a scary moment for me. I just didn't know what to do with it, so I just cried. And it's got to be an interesting story from her side. Still having no idea why I was crying. But so that was when I was 23, and I kept dating. I found girls that I would be I really liked, was willing to marry if they felt the same way about me. I think I didn't realize how much, looking back at it now, I think I didn't realize how much my same-sex attraction was affecting my inability to move things forward with girls. I mean, I always knew that I had a hard time, like, progressing a physical relationship, because I didn't have the same drive, and I also didn't know how. But also, like, women can tell when you want them in the way they need to be wanted. And that's probably less important for some women than others, but you're a really great guy, but let's be friends. And I'm not saying other guys don't get that speech as well. I've had a whole lot of that speech. And I think, looking back, hindsight, it's probably for a lot of them because they could tell. Anyway, fast forward several years. I just kept dating, kept trying. One of the things about, my story all the way through is that kind of early on I felt I felt like part of my personal ministry was to take care of other men. And so, like, when I was an elders quorum president during graduate school, it was one of the best times in my life, because I had a priesthood responsibility to be close to the men in my quorum. and to love and serve and help them. And I feel like, I mean, obviously, this doesn't mean like I was sexually attracted to everybody in my quorum and that directly helped me serve them. But this experience of generally being more attentive to other men, thinking about them and caring about their feelings and their lives, I feel like made me more able to take care of their needs than other guys who were just not aware because they'd never had to think through some of these things. And even in my patriarchal blessing, which I got in my early teens, I felt like there was part of that kind of just in the way part of it was phrased, I felt like there was this personal mission for me to spend time with the men of the church and to be strengthened by them and to strengthen them. And also a promise that as I mingled with them and also righteous women in the church, that I would be, that it would keep me from straying from the path. And when I first saw that, I thought it was great that there was like some acknowledgement of that kind of pull I felt toward ministering to other guys. But also it was like, wait, what are you talking about? The difficulty of like staying on the path. Like, why would I? Like, what would be difficult about that? And as I think about that now, okay. And having good close friends who are strong in the church has been an important part of my journey in helping me stay on the path. And there was also a little part of it, like when it talks about marriage, it says one day, and I was like, why does that sound like it's so far away? Why did you phrase it that way? And I think in a way it was preparing me for something that, marriage that has been delayed a lot longer than I ever thought it would be. And I actually don't know when that's coming or whether it will happen in mortality or later. I didn't have a lot of close friends in high school. I really wanted them. I had, people that I wanted to be close friends with, but I just didn't really have that. But when I got to college, going to BYU, that's when I finally found good, deep friendship. And I mean, there were difficulties with that. And again, in high school, like how I hadn't noticed it really with dating, because I didn't have super close friends in high school. I didn't notice it as much in high school. But when I got to have really deep, close friendships in college and later, it was a bigger deal because there was this difficulty of maintaining a wall in my friendships. This wall that I had to maintain because, I mean, I was completely committed to the gospel. And so I didn't want to do anything inappropriate that would take me down a wrong path. I also didn't want to spoil my friendships and change those relationships. And I also didn't want my friends to know. That was an important part of that, like the whole thing of trying to make sure that nobody ever found out. The scariest thing was the thought that one of my best friends might find out. And that I could lose one of those relationships that was, those were some of the most important things in my life. And so the thought of losing those, if they ever found out, was really scary. And so there's this idea or like feeling of having to maintain a wall in my relationships, in my friendships, where like I would be attracted to them, and that's part of why they were my best friends. I didn't want them to ever find out. that I was. I didn't want to try to do anything I shouldn't do with them. But it's really difficult to maintain that wall, to have really strong feelings for somebody, and to only act on some of them, to go ahead and develop all the other parts of a friendship, but to be really nervous about the wall and always maintaining the wall. And that's something that I actually still have to think about now, even though my best friends know. But I don't have to maintain the wall of secrecy anymore. I don't have to maintain the wall of hiding. I only have to maintain the wall of what I do, of my behavior. And I guess I'm kind of skipping ahead to the point where I told my friends, but once I got past that wall of secrecy, of hiding, my friends can actually help me to keep the wall of behavior, because then we can be open about it. Fear. I mean, the biggest struggle for me, with testimony not being a struggle through all this time, the biggest struggle for me, I guess two biggest struggles, were the difficulty of keeping it quiet, keeping it silent, keeping it hidden. And kind of along with that, the difficulty of not being able to be open, because I'm the kind of person who wants people to see every corner of my life. And like, to the point of like, there were times when I'd have a best friend and I was like, I would decide at some point that like they had permission, they could read my journals. I write in my journal every single day. So I have a pretty good record of my life, and I was totally willing for them to like read everything. Turns out I didn't write very much about same-sex attraction during all that time that I wasn't naming it to myself, therefore not writing about it to myself in my journal. So I really liked to be really open and have people be able to come into every corner of my life. And so it was painful for me to have a corner of my life that they couldn't go into, that I tried really hard to keep them out of. And then the other part was, I guess, a follow-on to that, feeling alone, feeling like I was the only one. And I mean, I knew there were gay people in the world. I knew that, obviously, but I didn't feel like there was anybody that I knew that I could talk to. I didn't want to talk to anybody who was like out loud and proud, like, because I didn't want to live that life. And I didn't want to be, I guess, tempted in that direction or persuaded in that direction. And other people who were like me, who wanted to live the gospel wholeheartedly, I didn't know who they were, because just like me, they were hiding. And there was no way for us to find each other. Over the last couple of years, things have changed a lot in the world. There's been a lot in the news, and a lot of difficulties with the church, or people having issues with the church, people having huge struggles with their testimonies, and just lots of people being really vocal and negative about the church because of this issue, because of marriage, because of Prop 8, all of this stuff. And it was really difficult for me to kind of keep my voice inside, because I wanted to be able to speak out in support of the church, in support of the doctrine of the family, in support of this plan of salvation that I knew was true and wanted to live. But I felt like if I did speak out in support of all of that people would just think I was a bigot, just like they accused all of these other people who would speak out strongly for it. And I knew that I had something to bring to that conversation that nobody else had, or not nobody else, but that many of these other people didn't have. I actually did know. I actually do have the struggle. I know exactly what it feels like. But I can't tell you that, because if I tell you that, then you'll know that this is something that I struggle with, and I hadn't yet told anybody, and so I I couldn't have that voice. But that was one of the things that pushed me to finally start opening up. That, and I was lonely. So I talked to my bishop, because like I said, you know, these other guys are going to be invisible. I talked to my bishop and said, if there's anybody else in my ward who has this, you know, who's been talking to you about this, you can tell them my name. Like you can see if they would be willing to talk to another guy. And then you can tell them my name. I'll out myself first. And if they're okay with talking, then tell me who they are. And that first time, so there actually was somebody, and I'd known him, I just didn't know that about him. And so I talked to him for the first time, and it was just on the phone, because I think he'd moved away by that point, but it was a revolutionary thing in my life to be able to talk to somebody who knew what it felt like. I had talked to a couple people in my family by that point. I just felt impressed too, but in so many ways, like, they didn't really understand. And so being able to talk to somebody who actually knew, like, I could just say what happened, what my experience was. I didn't have to explain, you know, like when I told my brother, he was like, what does that actually mean, to have same-sex attraction? Couldn't actually wrap his mind around what it actually meant. But for the first time, I had somebody who actually understood already, because he'd experienced it. And so he pointed me to North Star. Then I joined the email group, and then I had an email group of people that, I hadn't met in person, but that I could talk to about things that I could, they would email back and forth about the issues and be really open. And suddenly I had a community that I could talk with, and I wasn't alone anymore. It was amazing. It was revolutionary to finally have a community, to finally not be alone. And then it came to the point where I felt impressed to tell my roommates. And this and telling my best friends was the scariest part, because I felt like I had the most to lose, especially with my best friends. And so it was super, super scary. But I followed the prompting to tell my roommates, who fortunately had been open and vulnerable about other things in their lives, to where I at least felt like I could chance it. And when they told me, it doesn't change anything, nothing needs to change, that was the exact thing that I needed to hear. And, you know, you might think I needed tons of support, or like, we love you, and never hurts. But just because that's what I was afraid of. I was afraid that everything would need to change. I had kind of progressed past feeling like it was a sin that I needed to constantly repent of. I had gotten to where I could recognize, well, these feelings, like, it's just my experience. It's not sin. I'm not doing anything in response to it, anything wrong. And so I think I had kind of processed away a lot of the shame, but I was still hiding because I was afraid that it would change my relationships, and that I would lose the close relationship I had with my roommates, that, you know, they, or like one of them, wouldn't be comfortable living with me anymore. Or with my best friends, that they would then like rethink our whole relationship and all the ways that we had been close, and like everything that had happened, and like reframe it in the light of same-sex attraction, and then be afraid of me as a friend, and drop that friendship. So for them to say, nothing needs to change was the exact thing that I needed to hear. And it wasn't, that kind of started the ball rolling, and it wasn't too long after that that one of my two best friends came to visit for the weekend. And it was so hard and it was so scary. But I got up the courage to tell him. And I was actually really mad because he told me he kind of already figured. Because he had another friend who had same-sex attraction that he had known about in college, and that he'd kind of figured for a while. And I was mad. I was mad that I hadn't been good enough pulling off the hiding, but also comforted at the same time that so many years of our friendship, when I had been scared that he wouldn't love me if he found out, he actually kind of already thought so, and still loved me all the way through. And so that was kind of about the craziest weekend I ever had. Because what happened, so he was there, kind of through the weekend, but gone for Sunday. And then that Sunday was fast and testimony meeting. And I had no plans for telling any more people that day or anything. But I sat in the back of the chapel, and the Spirit told me to go up and tell my ward, and to finally start having this voice in support of the doctrines of the gospel. This voice that only I could have. As somebody who really knew what same-sex attraction was like, but who completely believed in the gospel as well. And I was so afraid. And I was sitting there in my chair shaking, thinking that the girl next to me probably had to see me shaking and be wondering what was going on. But I got up and I told my whole ward all at once. And it was the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. Just the fear of what could happen, the rejection that I could face. I mean, I love the people in my ward, and they love me a lot. And so in so many ways I shouldn't have worried, but I was petrified. Yeah. So I told my whole ward. And different than things that they had heard before, because they'd had people come out over the pulpit before in fast and testimony meeting. This wasn't necessarily new for some of them, but they had never heard anybody who wasn't up there to kind of talk about a change in their life and how, and their doubts about the gospel, and how they were going to live a different life. I think a lot of them hadn't heard this voice of someone who, I have same-sex attraction, but I'm still as committed to the gospel as I've ever been. I'm still the same person. I've had it all along. You just didn't know. And my devotion to the gospel I hope, not that it was there for them to, on display for them, but they know how much I love the gospel. They know how committed I am. And so when they see me say that, and when they see that it doesn't, it's not making me change and go and live a different life, and that I can stand strong in my testimony for the gospel, I think it was a really important thing for a lot of them to hear, and something new that they hadn't heard. But it's a voice that more and more I'm finding I'm not alone. I'm not alone in being that person who can have that voice. But people People need to hear it, and they were so happy to hear it. And so despite all the fear going into that, I had the greatest outpouring of love. So I came down from that. It was kind of close to the end of the meeting. Somebody jumped up right away to come and sit by me. And then the meeting ended, and people just came up to talk to me and hug me. And by the end of that day, 70 people had reached out to me either in person or email, texts, Facebook messages, a note written on the back of a tithing slip. Somebody wrote me a note and sent it in the mail. I had texts from people in other states who had heard from people who were in the meeting, which were like, oh, it's already going cross country. There was no negativity, no rejection, just love and support, and gratitude that I would share that voice. And so over the year since, I've been able to be a lot more open. I mean, my whole ward knows by now, so why worry too much about telling anybody else? There's already hundreds of people who know. And having that last corner of my life finally be open, to actually be able to be like completely open, my whole self, and not be hiding a corner of it away from people, so liberating. And through that year, with North Star and with other communities that I've been able to find, I've been able to have this sense of community and belonging with other people who understand the struggle of same-sex attraction, and who also totally understand my devotion to the gospel, and where I don't have to explain either one. And so, I mean, there's just this feeling of home and belonging. And that is feeling that I've found within the church, despite what people will say about the church not being inclusive. And I'm not saying that everybody is just always great and that there is no rejection. But there is a lot of acceptance and love and support. So what has changed in my life that allows me to thrive despite same-sex attraction? So one thing actually is something that hasn't changed. I'd say that the number one thing is my friends. And I guess the thing that has changed in that is that now they know. And the fact that now that they know they still love me is huge, because I mean they've seriously made my life with the love and friendship that I've always felt from them, but the fact that then continued just as strong and even stronger once I was open with them about that part of my life, is something that really helps me to strive, to thrive. And I think that's a big thing that helps me now. I don't really know what's going to happen as far as marriage and the timing of that. But God has blessed me with the ability to find and make friends, and I've worked on that, because in the lack of that maybe deeper and longer relationship that marriage will eventually be, having friends who love and support me is really what fills in those gaps. And I'm starting to learn to ask for the things that I need in my friendships. And I'm finding that my friends are willing to help with those needs that I have. When I ask for their help, they're there for me. So what gives me hope in this thing of having same-sex attraction is my knowledge of who God is and who I am. I know the kind of person that he is. I know him well enough to know that no matter what things look like right now, and no matter that I don't necessarily have specific answers about, like, am I going to be able to get married in this life? I know he's going to take care of me. I also know that I am an eternal being and I'm his child, and that I existed a long time before this mortal life. And that some of the experiences that I have while I'm in this life, they're for now. They're temporary. They're helping me learn and grow. They're helping shape me in important ways. But they're not going to be there forever. Because I don't know for sure that, or exactly how my feelings towards other men will change after this life in the eternities. But what I do know is that the God that I know will not allow me to be permanently in a situation that doesn't allow me to choose his plan and be completely happy with it. And so, since I understand his plan to be exaltation, being married to a woman for time and eternity, I know that at some point he's going to make it possible for not just for that to happen, but for me to enjoy it as much as any other man ever did. And that's just because of my knowledge of him. Like, I don't have any specific thing that tells me that specifically. Nobody has talked about that specifically that I know. But I know the character of God. And I know how he feels toward me. And I know that he wants me to be happy. And so no matter what happens right now, and he helps me be happy now too. But just kind of the big picture, like I am bigger than this struggle that I have right now, as an eternal being, and God is bigger than it as well. He can take care of it. He's solved way bigger problems. He has a tendency to turn hard things into beautiful things and broken things into amazing things. And he has this amazing kind of artistic ability to take something that looks like it's completely the wrong thing and make it into the most beautiful, right thing that could ever be. So what would I say to somebody who's thinking about coming out, or just thinking about whether it's a good idea or not? For me, it was really important. I don't know that it's going to be similarly important for everyone. There are a lot of people who don't really share anything about their lives. In my experience, vulnerability is really important, and sharing and opening up is really important. And it's healthy and it helps a lot. And also, people really can't be with you and be on the same page and really understand you if you don't open up. So, I mean, there are risks, and I've heard stories about people coming out and having a really difficult time with it, with people's reactions. People have reacted in really cruel ways. That hasn't been my experience, and I feel really blessed that it hasn't. In the end, I think we have to have some faith and trust, and we have to kind of jump and try, because if we don't push through that fear, like if I hadn't pushed through the fear of telling people, I would have never had the great outpouring of love that came after that. I would have just always had the fear of what would happen. I would have never had the opportunity to discover that it didn't matter to people, or that actually it did matter to people, but in a positive way. And they loved me and they were proud of me. And they understood, or say with a friend who has the same struggle and had not told anybody, now they have somebody to talk to. Now they know, because I started by being vulnerable. For me, the benefits outweigh the risks by quite a lot. I mean, there are a lot of questions about how you can feel belonging within the church, and it's actually something that maybe I'm just lucky, but hasn't been difficult for me. But so it has been difficult for me in some ways. The emphasis on marriage. It can be difficult. Like nobody likes having their family pressure them about dating or marriage. But I guess the thing that's helped me through that kind of stuff, the church's emphasis on families and marriage, and single word emphasis on dating and dating and constantly talking about that, is just to take a step back and realize I believe in marriage just as much as any of those other people do. And even though it doesn't seem like it might not seem like a possibility, or it might not seem like, it feels like it'll take a miracle for that to happen in my life. But I believe in miracles. But also like that, the pressure that people kind of exert on me, in some ways I have to just realize that they're concerned about me because they love me. They may not be approaching it the best way, but I want marriage just as much as they do, and I believe in it just as much as they do. And when I hear a talk about marriage, I don't have to take that as like something that makes me not belong, because I do belong just as much as anybody. And marriage is something that will eventually be part of my eternal life, because God will make that possible. But I guess I can take that doctrine, and I can enjoy the doctrine, and I can learn the doctrine, even though I am not married myself right now. In terms of belonging in community, I guess the biggest thing that I would say to people, but just based on my experience, is that I think the thing that's made the biggest difference for me is I don't take myself out. In terms of belonging, I know that I belong, and I don't take myself out. When somebody says welcome to everyone, and doesn't say specifically welcome to our same-sex attracted brothers and sisters, it's okay that they don't specifically welcome me in that category, because I was part of the group welcome. They meant me. They weren't trying to exclude me. And if I don't exclude myself based on putting myself in this category, if I don't decide that I am so much different from everyone else, that I don't belong, other people actually, some people might, but I think the average person doesn't actually have any problem including us when we know this, when they know this about us. And for a long time people didn't know. I think most people didn't know, because I think I was pretty good at hiding it. But I wasn't any different. And I think we actually, as the people with same-sex attraction, need to focus on our faith in Jesus Christ. And when we talk to other people in the church about our experience, we are kind of, as Maya Angelou says it, we are more alike than we are unalike. And I think that's kind of, it's more like a statement to people who are not inclusive, making the point to them that we are more alike than we are unalike. But to the person who is feeling left out, I think it's important for us to realize that we are more alike than we are unalike, and that people actually include us if we don't pull ourselves out into a different category, if we don't pull ourselves out of the belonging. So I think one thing that I often end up talking with people about when I'm kind of sharing and we're talking through the difficulties of all of this, and maybe they'll ask the question like, how do you how do you face it? How is it okay? I think something that's been important for me to realize is that I don't have a monopoly on suffering, and I'm actually part of a singles ward, a mid-single adult ward, and I mean, if I think about it, I mean, people might think that I can't handle my life because I'm not having sex. That, because I'm a same-sex attracted man, that I therefore have this need to have sex, and because of the same-sex attraction with other men. But I'm in a ward full of people who, I mean, maybe some of them are having issues, but they're not having sex either. And they're thriving. And they're working through this, and they're serving, and they're giving, and they're loving, and they're belonging, and they're not having sex either. I might not end up getting married in mortality, but there's a lot of people there who won't either. There are a lot of people in the world who for whatever other reason, won't be able to get married, or there are other things in their life that they'll never be able to enjoy during mortality. And I don't have a monopoly on, I mean, it's difficult. It's obviously difficult. And it's it's something I have to work with every day. And I don't mean to say that it's not special, but also we're not the only ones.